In Sweden we have a regulated rental market, which means that in Stockholm area and Gothenburg, Malmö, it's almost impossible to build rental apartments and for that to be a good deal. So especially in comparison then to what you would get if you build and sell as co-ops. So that's a little complicated, and that also everyone says, oh, we need to build more, but then we should have this regulated market, but that's a completely different story. This residential situation, as Rikke said, is not only Stockholm, Gothenburg, Malmö. It's basically all of Sweden except the really small towns. Luleå, for example, as you mentioned, and some other cities way up north, you need to wait for years in line to get an apartment. And since the rents are regulated, they are kept very low. Even in Luleå, rental apartments, if you buy like a portfolio of rentals, they would trade at like 4% yield. So it's considered like the most core investment you can do, even if it's very far from Stockholm.
Exactly. But I mean, there is an institutional market in all of the countries, with the exception of Norway, which doesn't really exist. I think Arvid was also showing that, but we are in that piece of art that was over here. We're obviously quite low in the bottom left-hand corner in terms of the deals, but that's kind of what you would expect with residential as well. So it's very similar to other places. What will, I think, drive, this is purely related to Finland, for example, but there is, just like was mentioned, there is a lot of demand for residential, and all of the capitals need more. There's been a recent change in the legislation in Finland where the pension funds that we talked about, who are mainly going abroad, they're now allowed to use leverage on their direct residential investments, which they have not been able to do before. And that's spurring up a lot of development, new development. So they've all announced big schemes. So there will be more supply in that sense, but in terms of the apartments. But I think there will be more investment demand as well. The big challenge with Resi is that, I mean, if you look at the returns in the past 5-6 years, it's going to be very difficult to replicate that going forward.
But the interesting thing is, you saw the graph about the growth in the office market rent. The interesting thing would be to see one in the Resi market rent, because there you're probably going to see Sweden being like this, and Finland and Denmark being like this. There's a significant growth, and one of the most liberal markets actually is Finland. It's the only place in the world where a landlord can terminate the tenant in Resi. That I still find very unique. You can send a little letter to your tenants and say, we want you out in 6 months, bye. And then you can, sell it or whatever you want. It's very interesting. But the most liberal market in that sense is Finland. Then for market rent purposes, but there is no real Resi rental market. The second one is then Norway, is very liberal as well. Not that you can terminate the contract with your tenants. Then comes Denmark, as long as it's stock out that's built after 91, and then comes Sweden. Sweden is very regulated. It's far behind, yeah. But you see serious rental growth in especially Copenhagen and Helsinki at the moment. But again, it depends on what you want. It is considered a core, and it is considered an area where a number of investors are investing. And the reason it's considered core is the low risk, because there's such a high demand for Resi, so you will never stand without a tenant for your apartments. In Denmark, for example, if the tenant terminates, they have to terminate their contract 3 months before they move out, but they have to move out 2.5 months before. They still have to pay for the 2 weeks that you are then taking over as the landlord the apartment to paint it and make it ready for the new one. They have to pay for the painting and everything, the tenant. So they will paint it for you, well, you will do it. They have paid for it, and then on the day that they are out of the contract, the next one is moving in. So it's just rolling like this. It's a really, really interesting investment, and every time somebody moves in, you increase your rent. And the other thing is, it's also countries, and also in Sweden, but it's different ways of owning your apartment. But it's countries where people love to own their own apartments, so if they can, they will start buying them. So when things are going up a little bit again, and you see that in Denmark, for example, the prices for what we currently, when we invest in real estate, in resi real estate in Denmark, we can then wait 1 or 2 years, and when we can actually sell the individual apartments on the market and make fairly good IRRs on that, double digit, which is very interesting.
I think that's probably been one of the reasons actually why you've seen most of we sold at the end of last year at Catella, we sold a portfolio of about 300 million euro resi. It was the biggest deal in Denmark last year. And the investors, the 5 top investors for that portfolio were not Nordic. They were all US private equity, and none of them had invested in the Nordics ever before. And we don't sort of see that, I mean, that's where you can really get the sort of the higher teen and more plus IRRs, doing just exactly what Rikke's talking about, where you're buying these larger blocks of residential and then it's break-up sale shortly thereafter.
And it's a different legal situation. You need to sell the entire property, and you need to get 67% of the tenants to vote for that. Yeah.
It's a process.
It's a long process. you can
It's a very democratic process.
Yes, very democratic process, but you can do a very good deal on that too. But it's also reflected already in the yield that you buy these assets for when you buy them as rental apartments.